for human error.
Hey guys, RanterInShades here, exercising my First Amendment rights vlog style. We're living in a very weird time right now. You can tell with the backdrop that things are definitely changing on my end, but this isn't about just me. The world around is also in a weird transition process and has been over the last 2 decades at least, from the way entertainment is consumed, to the way information is consumed, to the way we interact with others. We've seen so much change for better or worse, and it's only natural that this will continue going forward. But going along with these technological innovations, another thing that's been changing is attitudes towards various things in life. If you've been following this channel for a while, you know that I've always been a very staunch defender of people being able to enjoy what they like. It's why I've taken such a strong opposition to gatekeepers, whether they be in the form of metal elitists or social justice warriors, and it's also why I've pushed to separate the art from the artist message in so many of my videos, along with being against what's been dubbed over the last few years cancel culture. What cancel culture essentially refers to is when someone gets called out for something on a heavy-duty scale and people are forced to reevaluate if it's acceptable to still like or support the person.
Player 1, your future is cancelled.
I've also seen the term used to refer to a piece of work that's being considered as no longer appropriate to enjoy for whatever reason, though I mostly use it to refer to the former. The latter I think might need its own video. I first heard the term coined in a podcast from ARTV back in 2018, but if you think about it, contrary to what people who think this generation is full of oversensitive snowflakes might tell you, cancel culture as a concept has probably existed as far back as when the media and the press first became a thing. There have been countless stories about a high-profile individual coming under fire for something they've done, probably even before television was a thing. And whether the impetuses were valid or not, they've indeed been a thing in the time before the age of the internet and social media, where it became more widespread. A classic example that comes to mind is of course the PMRC and their quest to sanitize music after Tipper Gore caught her daughter listening to the song Darling Nikki by Prince, which was the first song they put on their infamous Filthy 15 list. Another example that comes to mind is something I remember Muse Productions, back when he was good and had some sense, had a series of videos about called The Truth Behind Hip Hop. This was a commentary series on a televangelist conspiracy theorist by the name of G. Craig Lewis, who sold DVDs preaching about the evils of rap music and the likes of Jay-Z, Snoop Dogg, and even the kings of melodic flow, Bone Thugs and Harmony. My friend Damien Skyfire made a video recently about this aspect of cancel culture, and I'd love for you guys to check it out. He gives more examples that prove that sensitive, trigger-happy individuals getting up in arms over things in popular culture are nothing new. And he also kind of proves horseshoe theory too, which is of course music to my ears. But aside from that, the most common misconception of cancel culture that I've noticed is the idea that unless a person's career is completely tanked or non-existent, then they aren't really canceled. I actually tried disputing this idea on one of Adosa Buckley's recent videos about Morgan Wallen. He argues in this video that because Morgan Wallen still has supporters and still has music charting well despite footage leaking of him using the N-word, then he was not canceled. The way I see it, and this is disregarding however I feel about people using the N-word, you don't need to be a victim of cancel culture to be a target of it. Here's the comment I left. The way I've always seen it, cancel culture isn't so much the concept of outright ending someone's career or getting them deplatformed, but rather the advocacy of such. That's why I've always rolled my eyes whenever someone says, cancel culture isn't real because they still have a career and an audience, because it's basically moving the goalposts. You see, that's the main common denominator in all the stories we've heard about someone getting canceled. Even if the person still has a career and the cancel culture mob failed to completely end it, it doesn't change the fact that these callouts are typically made with that in mind. Buckley actually responded to my comment. The thing is, it's not moving the goalposts, it's trying to explain what canceled means. If your favorite show is canceled, it ends. It's over. That's it. If a person still has a career and fans and people giving them money to perform, they still have a career. I apologize if that impression was bad. The problem with this line of thinking is that it's black and white absolutist. If we were looking in black and white reasoning, Buckley would be correct. But even if they still have a career and an audience, that doesn't change the fact that a person's name was being dragged through the mud, and their canceling is going to follow them throughout their career and linger in their mind for years to come. This may be an extreme example, but let's look at Count Dankula. And a certain death metaler immediately came at that mention. Sure, his channel is doing really well, but I'm sure most people watching this wouldn't know who he was were it not for the satirical Nazi pug video that led to him getting convicted, leaving a permanent mark on his record. By Buckley's logic, Dankula wasn't canceled, even though what we saw with that story was pretty much cancel culture in action. Also, I don't think it makes sense to compare a person's career to a show's run. Sure, a show could be the height of a person's career, but they aren't one and the same. Not to mention, when a show gets canceled, it's usually for reasons such as low ratings, the company not having faith in the show so they get rid of it to make room for something they're more confident in, and other reasonable justifications. In the cases of a lot of cancel culture stories, not gonna say all because I hate generalizing, that's not typically the case. Now, this isn't to say that there aren't any valid reasons to cancel someone. Indisputable cases of pedophilia or grooming are an example of where I tend to draw the line and whether or not I think a person deserves to be canceled. You want an example? I'll give you two. Look no further than Ian Watkins or the Creepy Onion Man. These might be old examples, and this might be a high raising of the bar, but the bar at least exists. What do I mean by that? Well, one popular thing that people like SJWs say to justify cancel culture is things like,
cancel culture isn't real, it's just consequence culture.
Along with, of course, the mention of,
freedom of speech doesn't mean freedom of consequences.
The latter is such a no-shit statement because I'm not sure any rational person really believes otherwise, especially since freedom of speech is, has, and always will be a two-way street. Just like how you have the freedom to say what you want, someone else has that same freedom to say what they want that's critical of your speech. And as such, there will be some form of consequence that comes with that.
You have desecrated the spirit of
human decency.
Prepare to take the consequences.
Consequences, consequences, as long as I'm rich.
With that in mind, there's nothing wrong with consequences.
It's alright, it's alright. Sometimes that's all it takes. We're only human, we're supposed to make mistakes.
Humans are flawed. They will make mistakes, intentionally or otherwise, or they'll do something that warrants that kind of a reaction. I've been there, you've been there, we've all been there. Part of growing up is learning that your actions have consequences, as well as learning how to face them head on.
When will you learn that your actions have consequences?
Sometimes there comes a point where we just gotta suck it up and take the L like a man and try to be better going forward. It's really all we can do sometimes. Again, it's all part of the two-way street that is free expression. Once again, there's nothing wrong with consequences. There's nothing wrong with criticizing someone's actions when they do something to warrant it. If you name a person that's come under fire for something, be it sexual assault or spouting some silly political statement, I likely won't disagree that they should face some kind of backlash for it. I wouldn't have gone after the likes of Buddy Nielsen or Chris Taylor Brown if I didn't think that. What people like me take issue with, though, is using those principles as justification to destroy their career, get their audience to turn on them, and let them rot in irrelevance. I'm of the belief that you can criticize someone without advocating for them to just fuck off. I'm also of the belief that you can criticize someone's actions with the idea that they learn from their mistakes and be better going forward. Believing otherwise is destructive and completely defeats the idea of improvement, because why would they want to improve if they're not being given a chance to? The thing about mistakes is that they're meant to be learned from. We've all had a moment in our lives where we got something wrong, said something stupid, or did something that caused harm to someone or even multiple people, and when we faced criticism for how we acted in those situations, we self-reflected, considered their counter-arguments, and thought about what we can do differently to avoid repeating these mistakes. That's how learning from your mistakes works, and it's a crucial aspect of maturity. Unless there's evidence that proves these mistakes are a consistent and recurring pattern with someone, cancel culture is pretty much counterproductive to this idea. And that's especially the case when it comes to instances where a person is put on blast for a social media post they made years ago. Is it really that unreasonable to assume that the person's changed within this time parameter?
No.
Even if there's no indication that they don't stand by whatever they said, it's still possible that they've grown to some degree since then and are much different with how they conduct themselves nowadays. That's a big reason why I've always found it unfair to hold someone's mistakes over their head for years and never let them live it down. Again, not because I don't think they should face any consequences or that we should forget whatever it is they've done, but because it defeats the purpose of growing as a person. This kind of treatment should really only be reserved for people who have proven that they won't change, no matter how many chances they're given. Especially if they make really empty apologies with the intent of saving face, or it's obvious they're only doing so because they got called out by a large number of people. At the same time, though, this is not to say we should be distrustful and never believe an apology could be genuine, because to me that kind of defeats the purpose of apologizing in general. Sure, backlash is usually what ends up bringing out an apology from someone, but who are you to say that that's reason enough to think an apology is bullshit? Not saying that never happens, but I'd think if someone were apologizing, it's because they understand what they did or said hurt someone or a group of people, and they understand that they need to be better if they really want to earn respect. What I pay attention for when evaluating an apology, and I do this myself whenever I'm in a position where I need to apologize to someone, is if the person is deflecting or making excuses. If they're doing that, I'd say it's a pretty clear sign that they're more so sorry that they got caught than anything. But if they put themselves in the shoes of whoever they hurt and show that they understand why they're upset, they take responsibility for what they did and show that they want to be a better person and that they're committing to taking the necessary action required, along with understanding that they aren't owed forgiveness, that to me is a genuine apology. I remember last year, Brent Walsh, the lead singer of one of my favorite bands, I the Mighty, faced allegations of sexual misconduct. I'm a part of the band's Facebook group, and I remember everyone just going nuts over the whole thing. I remember reading Brent's statement about the allegations and found no hints of excuse-making, deflecting, or even saying the allegations were false without any substantiation. He does mention he doesn't remember anything taking place, but he doesn't discount the idea that something did happen. He understands that it's not his place to call the victim a liar right off the bat, and takes responsibility for his actions and acknowledges that they are
Not okay.
That's why I see his apology as genuine, and this is aided by the fact that he mentioned he was going to make a donation to RAIN, which he followed through on, along with wanting to seek therapy, which I'm sure he also followed through on. Just like how I understand that there are people that make these shitty, half-assed apologies with the intent to damage control, I understand that there are people that use cancel culture as a buzzword. They do so as a means of playing victim because they're being put in a hot seat, and that does undermine what cancel culture, and by extension criticism in general, actually is. I can understand if you don't agree with the criticism, or you think that the people coming to you with these critiques aren't being fair or reasonable, but there's a time and a place to claim that you are being canceled. As I established in my comment on Buckley's video, that time is when a person or group of people are advocating for you to just go away and for your audience to not exist, regardless of if that actually ends up happening or not. Not all negative criticism is made with that in mind. It's unhealthy to assume that anyone speaking at all critically of you is doing so because they hate you, they want clout, they want to drag you and not give you any chance of redemption, etc. So if anyone says that these kinds of instances aren't examples of cancel culture, I'd say,
You are correct, sir!
I feel the same about when works of media are being questioned if they're acceptable in the current year. Like earlier this year when there was that story of those 6 Dr. Seuss books no one had heard of that were being discontinued. People blew that story out of proportion and acted like Dr. Seuss's books as a whole were ceasing to exist when that wasn't the case at all. Same with the story about Mr. Potato Head getting rid of the prefixes to adapt to current society, which I personally agree is kinda dumb. In actuality, Potato Head still exists, just under a slightly different name. It's really important to pay attention to all aspects of these kinds of stories.
That's Mr. Potato Head to you.
Like I said earlier in this video though, I think the topic of works of media being deemed unacceptable to enjoy because they don't hold up to modern standards is a video for another day. Just know that as much as I think it's lame when people do that, I don't see it as being a component of cancel culture. What that has in common with cancel culture is that big word that starts with a G that I've been railing against on this channel for years. Say it with me, gatekeeping. Apart from everything I've stated in this video thus far, the biggest gripe I have with cancel culture is when people advocate that you stop enjoying the person's work, even if it's independent from how you feel about the situation at hand. So they're basically trying to gatekeep what you're allowed to enjoy. Sound familiar? This also applies to when people try to cancel an entire group of people over the actions of one person, like they're somehow responsible. One example of this is when Glenn Harvey, the former drummer of the English emo alternative rock band Moose Blood, faced some sexual assault allegations, which resulted in him being fired from the band. And apparently movements then pulled out of the tour they were going to do with them, all for the actions of one member of Moose Blood. It's like they made the necessary PR move. What more do you want? Like it or not, separating the art from the artist is a thing you were able to do. Enjoying music, movies, etc. is not an endorsement of any bad actions made by the people, nor is it an indication that you don't care about the issues at hand. You know what it is an endorsement of? Finding their work entertaining and enjoyable. After all, that's the whole purpose of music, film, and really art as a whole. Again, no one is disagreeing that the person should be held accountable for their actions. No one is disagreeing that these actions or beliefs are deserving of criticism. But as I've said in many videos before, going as far as to make people feel bad for what they like is ridiculous, and not to mention taking your anger out on the wrong people. Your outrage should really only be reserved for the person themselves, as well as people that are actually being apologists. A misconception about my channel that I get really annoyed when people make is that when I make videos like this, I'm basically saying you need to like something you don't want to like. If you dislike something, it's not my place to tell you you're wrong in doing so. I can try to convince you to reevaluate your thought process, but at the end of the day, it's up to you if you want to change your mind or not. If you don't want to enjoy the work of someone that's being put on the cancel culture chopping block, that's your opinion, and it's not my place to argue it. All I ask is that you be as respectful of if people choose to continue to enjoy it as you want them to do to you. There's a reason we're all taught the golden rule at a young age.
Those who want respect, give respect.
This also isn't me saying that I'm anti-victim. I'm not against people sharing negative experiences that they've had with someone, and as much as I believe in the concept of innocent until proven guilty, it's not my place to say whether or not what's being said by the alleged victim is valid. The most I would say for people on the outside of the situation is wait for the information to be confirmed before formulating your own opinion on the matter. And even if you make the decision to separate the art from the artist like what I usually do, it's not meant to be done as a fuck you to whoever they hurt or anyone that's been through similar experiences. Believing otherwise is nothing more than guilt by association. A recent example that comes to mind of a situation being exaggerated before more info came out rectifying everything is the situation regarding Dan Avidan, or Danny Sexbang, of Game Grumps and Ninja Sex Party. The story was originally framed to make him out to be a groomer for telling a girl who was 17 at the time that he wouldn't be playing a show in her area until a year later when she would be 18. As easy as this sounds to take out of context, the timing seems more coincidental than anything. And then he ghosted her after having sex, which the most I'd say about that is that it's kind of douchey, but not criminal. And there was a second accuser who omitted her age, trying to paint him as a creep for wanting to have sex, and it turns out that this woman was 22. Look, I get that it feels rewarding to take down someone famous or powerful, but you should never jump the gun unless you have all the credible facts on you. It's fluff like this that gets people to believe that cancel culture is all about freaking out over really small shit, or trying really hard for a gotcha moment on someone who happens to be more well-known than you. And it also leads to this thought being entertained.
When everyone's
cancelled.
No one will be.
I I actually have my own example of waiting for more info to come out before reaching my own conclusion, and that's the build up to me making my MDA video. Do you know how shitty I would have looked had I jumped straight into making that video weeks earlier than I did when information was still developing, especially if something happened along the way that rendered everything null and void? I would have looked beyond fucking stupid. Leaving aside how MDA failed miserably at trying to make everyone look short-sighted in his response to the whole situation, hence why he isn't on YouTube anymore, along with his Twitter being privated, it's important for situations like this to unfold before you lunge into any videos or social media posts, or at the very least leave some room in your initial thoughts for things to change. Regardless, waiting for situations to develop and more info to come out isn't meant to be anti-victim either. I feel saying otherwise pretty much translates to you saying,
But what about me?
or my favorite in the cases of alleged grooming,
Won't somebody please think of the children?
which is nothing but appealing to emotion because you don't like the fact that the situation isn't being addressed the way you want it to. Here's the bottom line. If your only goal is to speak out against bad actions that the person has done without advocating that they lose their job and or their audience, and without lashing out at people who choose to continue to enjoy their work because they like it or see artistic merit in it, I have no problem with that whatsoever, and no one should label that as cancel culture. Before you write it off as such, those are things you really need to pay attention for. Those are the big deciding factors in what separates cancel culture from consequence culture, as they say, and the kind of people that conflate the two and treat them as one and the same are basically the people that just straight up hate criticism. Thus concludes my thoughts on the whole concept of cancel culture. While it's dumb seeing it get misinterpreted or overblown, and while there are cases where it's considered justified, at the end of the day, it doesn't detract from the harm it tends to do. It's a really tricky subject that requires a lot of tact and nuance in your approach, and I hope I was able to make sense of it all, along with providing some clarity for anyone that falls into that trap of misinterpreting or overblowing what cancel culture actually is. If not, here's to hoping it doesn't get me canceled. #cancel culture. I'm Shades, and I'll see you next time.